Welcome back to another episode, a brand new season, and so much more. I'm excited to have you on and have you here, whether this is your first episode or you've listened to every episode. I want to thank you as we venture off into season 8, which I can't believe we're already in season 8 and 500 plus episodes. And we are mapping things out and launching another 52. That's our goal, 52 episodes for season 8. And I wanted to start this all off by understanding that your brain is not the boss. And I want you to understand how much consciousness is. And because we've been told for decades, okay, that the brain runs the show, that it dictates everything. And what we learned and what we understood through quantum physics has shown that, and conscious research, is they're flipping actually this narrative completely. And so they're looking at it and saying, well, what if your brain is actually the receiver, not the source? What if it's an antenna? What if consciousness, the field you exist within, is what's actually driving, okay? What's actually driving your reality. Today, we're going to go so deep into this. It's one of the most paradigm shifting ideas in modern science. And I'm going to show you why this changes everything and how you approach personal growth. Now, before we dive into everything, I want to share that I've been teaching my coaching clients this for 8 years and understanding that it's not about the mindset. And there's other things that are going to play a role in this. So before we dive in, make sure you like, subscribe, share this with a friend, follow us so that you don't miss anything when it comes up to our newest things that we have going on here at the Mindful Experiment, so much more. So let's first start off and let's look at the observer effect. It was a quantum physics study that was done, actually quantum mechanics, because it was done twice. It was done in the 30s, I believe, 1930s, and then again in 1970-ish when they used it with lasers. But, when we look at the study overall, they found that when an observer collapses a wave of infinite possibilities into a single fixed reality, not a metaphor. It's literally documented physics. This is what it does. When we look at something in a specific way, and this is what we see the outcome becoming, you collapse all other opportunity possibilities, and that becomes that. So I was talking to a client and I was saying, they were sharing something with me, and I kept telling them, I go, hey, they were talking about something that happened and they're trying to explain why. And I said, listen, whatever you say, this means this is going to mean this. And he's like, well, what if I said it was because what you're sharing with me is you have to struggle a little bit, you got to do this. But what if you said, and you truly believe that it's this, and this is what this is, and just feel that in that way? Would things be different? How would you feel? What would your vibe be? What would this? And he had to really start thinking about that for a second, because what you consistently observe and focus on really becomes your experience. And I wrote this in my book, Rediscover Your Greatness. It was chapter 2. It was 50-something pages of it. And it really detailed out why focus is so critical. Okay. Your attention is literally a creative force. It's a lens. We've talked about this on this podcast before. It's not new. It's just bringing it in, freshening it up a little bit for you to dive a little deeper in there. But there was the researchers done. I'm going to read this. Radin in 2012 said consciousness and the double slit interference pattern is where the study comes from, physics essays in there. So this is where they looked at it and understanding consciousness and how it plays a role. So what you choose in your life, how you see something, what you're viewing it as, this plays a role in every facet, whether you're a business owner, you're in relationships, you are looking at your health, everything. The way you see it, what it becomes. Wayne Dyer said, if I believe, don't correct me if I'm wrong, I may mess this up, but he said, like, if you believe you live in a hostile universe, then you'll experience hostility. But if you believe in a friendly universe, you'll experience friendliness. And it's really true on every single level. And so you can look at the way we look at our spouse and how we look at them for, well, this is what they always do, this is who they are, and X, Y, Z, and all this stuff. You put them in a box, you're only going to see that. You're going to miss everything else. You're going to miss all the good that's there. But if you look at all the good and focus on the good, you're going to actually not really pay attention too much to the negatives. This stuff works in business too, right? I can talk to a client. I'll know exactly where their perspective is. How many times I get on a call, it might be a chiropractor saying, oh man, doc, my numbers, hey man, what's good today? My numbers are down. I'm like, that doesn't sound good unless you're taking that time to be happy about it because you want to work on some stuff. Or, I talked to same thing with a coaching client, it doesn't matter, patient, it does not matter. It's how we observe it is what we're only going to pay attention to. And our eyes are only going to pick up on that type of information. Because at the end of the day, consciousness, I want you to understand, is a field. It's not a product of the brain. And what I love about this is that in spirituality, they've always said the soul's not in the body. Your body's in your soul, which meant we're a big field and the body's within that. And so, and I'm not saying that this study I'm going through right now is exactly that, but I'm just sharing when I ever hear science and I'm like, that relates to something like this. And it may not totally, if you talk to the physicists, they're like, that's not how we look at things. And I'm like, I get that. But when I'm looking at the bigger picture, this kind of makes sense. Because there's a hard problem of consciousness and why and how subjective experiences arise, right? This remains unsolved by neuroscience. We're not fully understanding that, but there's researchers such as like Bernardo Kastrup and Donald Hoffman propose that consciousness is a fundamental. It's not emergent. The brain is more like a radio tuning into a signal than actually generating one. This is why you have 50 to 70, in my opinion, 50 to 70,000 thoughts that go on and you can't control them. And the only thoughts that matter are the ones you think of. In meditation and meditation practice, it's the same concepts where they say you're going to have thoughts no matter what. When I teach people meditation, I'm like, you're going to have these racing thoughts. Thoughts are always there. I've been meditating for over 15, 20 years. And I can tell you that the thoughts are still there. I just don't give any energy to it. And because I don't give any energy to it, I can go ahead and stay focused on what I'm trying to do in my meditation. So it's kind of the same thing here when you're really, really trying to understand that these things are just going to be coming. And this is why I'm trying to break down each section here a little bit for you. So that way you can understand the depth of it all, where I'm going. Because in my book called Decoding the Matrix, I was kind of sharing this in that kind of a way. And there's things about, frequencies and the human collective consciousness, or what I call the matrix, and how it plays a role on us and our mind, because it's one of these things of experiences are constantly streaming at all times. So that's why thoughts will always be there. You're going to have very random, very different thoughts and so much more. I mean, to get even one more thing, let's just go even deeper, because I love this kind of conversation. They actually found out too now that you can actually encode information on atoms, and you can read it kind of like a disc gets read. New research that they've been probably, I don't know if it's in the last year or two, but it's come out. And they're sitting there and somebody asked the question, now, wait a minute, if there's coded information on atoms, all we are as humans and everything in this physical realm is just recycled atoms. There's no new atoms. They're all just recycled. And so some people don't like saying this, but you have the atoms of Jesus and Hitler both in you. We're all recycled atoms. We have dinosaurs recycled atoms. We're all recycled. And so the interesting thing about that, though, is why I share this, and this is where we step in more to our power, is that there is encoded information within us that we can access as we learn how to tap more within. And so, again, sharing some variabilities here. Consciousness is some cool stuff. We're going to be sharing a lot of stuff. I'm going off on a tangent here, so I want to get back to what I wanted to make sure I covered here. But I just want to open your mind, if I can, or just have you see the bigger picture a little bit of kind of how consciousness is just there and always is, and that our brain is more of like a radio frequency, and we tune in to specific signals that we're generating. It's the same thing like if you want to have joy, you got to tune your vibe of your body and your essence to that, and then once you do, you'll experience joy. So let's get into something called the non-local mind. All right. Here it is. A study that came from Princeton Peer Lab and by researcher Gene Rad again showed that human intention can influence random event generators and biological systems at a distance. This is kind of interesting, isn't it? Far beyond what the brain as a computer model can explain. Your mind is not confined to your skull. And this was in 2006. It was called Entangled Minds. And one of the things is that I've taken and understood in writing my book called Decoding the Matrix is how we are influenced by so many things. And I talk a lot I started talking more about this with patients about Schumann Resonance and stuff like this. And I would tell them that Schumann Resonance is a real thing, and that it's not just detecting thunderstorms nearby. It's an energy. It picks up on energy, where it's Earth's energy, what's fluctuating and shifting. But what's interesting too is humans can influence this. Because what I've remembered when I first got into Schumann Resonance, or started understanding it actually a little bit later, was 9/11 happened. And if you look at the Schumann Resonance like 4 or 5 hours before the event, it went spiking like crazy, and there was no storms nearby. And what they found is that major events in humanity would see a spike in that. We play a role. We influence that. When COVID was around, you could feel the panic of people. Even if you're maybe not as aware, you pick up on stuff. So we know that as much as our mind is non-local, and that when they shared in the study how it affects biological and also random event generators, it's one of those things that we're not confined just to where we are. And I'm not going to get into I love how there's a lot of spirituality stuff I can get into that I could pull it back and say, man, quantum physics has really supported that and it kind of proved that and shown that. But for this episode, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible. But I want you to understand that this is where I'll share a couple things about what this is. So like when you sit there and you think of someone, and if you think something positive of them and loving of them, you are sending them good vibes. You're sending them good juju. And what ends up happening is they may pick up on that. That might be the thing they needed. Now, you can be the opposite. You can worry about someone. You can worry about X, Y, Z, and so forth. And that may pick up and might influence them in some way, shape, or form. Because you got to remember, our mind is it's non-local in ways, which means we say our mind's right here when you think of it, but no, that's your brain. That's not your mind. Mind consciousness is everywhere. And there's studies that have now shown that we know that every single cell has access to this, but besides the point. So the point I'm trying to share here is to have you understand that there are so many levels to what we're influencing and who and what and how we are and how we focus and what we're tuning in. And you want to be very crystal clear on your tuning and where you're focusing at things are, because you are literally altering and shifting and changing that. You're altering, shifting, changing every single thing that you have around you, because remember, how you see it is what happens. You collapse the wave and that's what it becomes. But I want you to understand that your mind is not confined to your skull. It's beyond that. And it's non-local. It can affect other things. This is where quantum entanglement kind of talks about this stuff. How two things from no matter how far of a distance, you could take something from one end of the universe and put it all the way on the other end of the universe. And you can affect the shifts of one and it'll instantly affect the shifts of the other. It does not matter. Time, space does not affect that. So here's where I want to, as we wrap up this first episode of this season, I want to get into some practical applications. I want to share with you how to be a conscious observer in your own life and what you can do when it comes to these kind of. But there's so much out there, so much ancient wisdom has talked about this that it's just nice how quantum physics is finally playing. We as humanity using science is finally catching up to all this. So remember this, and I'll say this very straightforward. When you start to understand that you are the observer who collapses all the possibilities into an experience, the practice becomes clear. When you start to understand that how you see something, the vibe you put it to, the value you give it, how you measure it, good or bad, and put all those things on there, will determine that to be what it is. You start to understand how you tap back into your control and the power that you have within. Because let's face it, life you can't control. The only thing you can control is how you respond, which most people react, but it's more about teaching how to respond, how you want to see it. Something can happen to you, and it could be the most detrimental thing in the world, or you could feel that it was the most detrimental thing in the world. And the story you tell yourself in that instance is going to be the dictator of how you come out of that. Is it going to destroy you? Or are you going to come through the ashes like the phoenix and become the most powerful thing ever from that? And it's all based upon how we see that. How do you see your spouse? How do you see your business or your career? How do you see your health? How do you see things, and how do you what value do you put on it? Because remember, everything in life is neutral. The only thing that gives it a charge to attract is how you see it. And that's the one thing I didn't mention about the observer effect. Because once they did the studies, in the 90s, they did a study and they said, well, how did that all play a role? And they found out it wasn't that the person just was looking and everything reacted a certain way. It's how they measured it. And the measurement is what determined it. And that made more sense to me because that's how you define it. What you define by words in vibration, how you see it, is what it's going to become. And this is all backed by quantum physics. This is old ancient wisdom stuff. There's many different, I bet you, and Lao Tzu at some point talked about this in his I Ching. There's something there that says how you view something. If it's your first time listening, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another episode. And if you really enjoyed this or you know someone who could benefit from it, send them a text, send a link, and let them get into listening to this episode today. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I look forward to a very fun and exciting new season here at the Mindful Experiment.